Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. As many of you may already know, if you listen to either of the last two episodes, today is a very exciting day. And that is because today is the release of my 52nd weekly episode of this podcast. So it has been a whole year. What many of you might not know, because more and more people seem to be doing podcasts these days, but this is actually a very uncommon thing for a podcast to last that long. It is definitely a huge milestone. Very few people actually make it this far. Statistics show that the majority, most of the numbers that I've heard have said about 90 to 90% of people who start a podcast quit before they get to the 10th episode because of how much work is involved and how long it takes to grow them. And honestly, I never thought podcasting is something I would ever do, but I have, and I've really been loving it. So I've learned something about myself in the process. You know, it's a reminder to try new things, even things you don't think you'd like or be good at, because you can surprise yourself. So anyway, making it a whole year is a really, really huge accomplishment. And I know that you're all very busy, of course, as burned out working moms. That is a given. And so I just really appreciate, you all listening, you all being part of this. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different than the other ones that I have done. So no guests for today. Instead, I've been doing a lot of reflecting about this time and the many guests that I've had. And I'm going to use today to talk about some of the big themes, some of the big lessons that have repeatedly come up that I think are just so important for you moms. And I really want to share them. The big takeaways that I wish every burned out mom knew. And then later on, I have some things that I want to give you listeners to express my gratitude and appreciation. So I will share those at the end. So here we go. The 4 biggest lessons I want every burned out working mom to know. Lesson number 1, burnout is not a personal failure. And I know this sounds simple, but I can't tell you how many moms I've talked to, whether it's podcast guests, coaching clients, or even friends who genuinely believe if they are burned out, that they are the problem. They think, maybe they're not organized enough, not disciplined enough, not patient enough, not productive enough. They compare themselves to other moms who appear to be handling everything better than them, and then they wonder why they're struggling so much. And I get it. I've been there too. I can remember a time in my life when I felt like I was constantly trying to get caught up. I remember, when my daughter was first born and I went back to work. This was, 10 years ago. I was juggling a full-time job. I was pumping at work, scrambling when she was getting sick, feeling guilty that she was at daycare for so many hours of the day, knowing household responsibilities were waiting for me when I got back home, thinking it was my job to do everything. I felt reluctant to ask for help, wanting time to get back to regular exercise routine, thinking, well, she's a newborn. This will get easier when she gets older. All of those things. And in some ways it did. In some ways it did get easier when she got older. But in other ways it didn't. I'd wake up always feeling behind. There was always another thing to do, always another thing I was responsible for, always something else, another thing that somebody would need from me. And then seeing other moms who seemed to be handling it just fine and wondering why I was struggling. But the thing is, I wasn't actually failing at carrying everything around, and you are not either. The problem is that the demands are too high. You are carrying too much, whether they are demands from other people or demands that you place on yourself. We get burned out because these demands that are so common, that are placed on so many moms today are not reasonable and they're not realistic. And that's not because of you. That's because it has been culturally normalized for moms to take on all of these roles, do all the things, expect, expect moms to do all of these things effortlessly. I just want you to think about all the things that mom are expected to carry. It's a lot. We are managing schedules. We're keeping track of appointments. We're remembering birthdays, planning meals, helping with homework, taking care of, aging parents in some cases, supporting our spouses, managing our households, working full-time jobs in a lot of cases, trying to take care of our health, trying to be present for our kids, trying to be good friends, trying to somehow squeeze in self-care without feeling guilty about it. And that's assuming everything goes as expected. It's even harder when some crisis or curveball, or something like that is unexpectedly thrown our way. And then we are adapting and we're adjusting, and it feels like even more. So it is no wonder that so many moms feel so exhausted. And instead of looking at the impossible amount they're carrying, they look at themselves and they think they should be handling everything better. One of the things that keeps coming up in this podcast, um, that I'm sure you've picked up on is that burnout is often a completely normal response to an unsustainable situation. It is. That is why we're here, because it is so common. It's not a failure. It's not a character flaw. It's not proof that you're doing motherhood wrong. Burnout is simply a sign that you have been putting yourself last for too long, meeting everyone else's needs while ignoring your own. So, again, this is one of the reasons why I started this podcast. This is one of the reasons I love this podcast so much, because when we hear other moms share their stories, we are reminded that we are not the only ones struggling. I think a lot of us kind of know that, but there's something different about really hearing the stories, hearing the specific details of the other experiences that, of other moms. And again, just really recognizing that we are not the only ones struggling. Unlike those picture perfect, social media posts that are just everywhere. And that brings me to lesson number 2. The moms who do start feeling better, the ones who are burned out and then you see them start to feel better, are not necessarily the moms who are learning how to do more. They're not the ones who figure out how to squeeze more into their day. It's actually very much the opposite. The moms who are starting to feel better, they are the ones who stop trying to squeeze more into their day. They're the ones who stop trying to figure out how to do more. So I'm going to pause for a minute so you can really think about that last thing that I just said. The moms who start feeling better are not the ones who figure out how to do more. They are the ones who stop trying to. So instead of asking, how do I get more done? They start asking questions like, do I actually need to be doing all of this? Instead of asking, how do I be more productive? How can I be more productive? Instead, they ask themselves, what do I need right now? I know that idea, that can feel uncomfortable for a lot of moms because we were taught that being a good mom means sacrificing, being a good wife means putting everyone else first. Being a good employee means constantly pushing through. And then going back to the first point, that needing help somehow means we are failing, which as we know, as we talked about a minute ago, it does not. The thing about most burned out women is that they're incredibly capable women. They are hardworking, they're responsible, dependable. People tend to trust them. And so as a result, these are all good things. These are all great qualities. But as a result, they end up carrying more and more and more until it becomes too much. So again, it's not about becoming more efficient. Now, don't get me wrong, having skills and strategies for this can be really helpful. And I do help moms with, learning some strategies that can be helpful with time management and those sorts of things, because it is really important. But at the end of the day, those things aren't going to be what actually helps you overcome burnout. What's going to help you more is learning how to put some of the weight down, whether it means setting boundaries, asking for help, saying no to something you don't actually want to do, letting go of the expectation that everything has to be done perfectly. These are all things that so many moms struggle with, which again is part of the reason why there are so many of us who are burned out. So as an example, my daughter, if you've been listening to the podcast, if you followed me on social media at all, my daughter, she does dance. She's 10 years old. She just had her recital last week. And for those of you who are dance parents, the craziness that comes to the end of the dance season. There is just so much to do. So much. And I see the pressure so many of these moms and dancers put on themselves to be perfect. And I get it. When they're competing, the goal is to score as well as they possibly can, and they don't want to risk anything being deducted, if they can help it. I get that. Like, that's why they're there. But that doesn't mean that we can't let anything go. There are some ways to let some things go. For some things, it is okay to not be perfect about. Again, using my daughter as an example, and her dance, when she was little, like, much younger than she is now, I always did her hair, her makeup, all the things, because there was no way she'd be able to do it herself, not when she was that young. And then as she got older and started to become more interested in these things and more independent, she started wanting to do it for herself, particularly over the last year or so. And at first, I didn't let her. I mean, I did when it really didn't matter, for like picture days and competitions and stuff, I was still doing it for her. Um, Mainly because she really hadn't had enough practice yet. But now, for the most part, I do. I do let her do those things. She did her own hair and makeup at, the recital last week. Um, and when I look at it, because she's still learning, sometimes her hair isn't parted as perfectly as I would probably want it to be. Um, and, her makeup doesn't look like a professional did it. Not that it looks that way when I do it either. But honestly, it looks good. And it's not perfect, but it is good enough. She does a pretty darn good job, especially for a 10-year-old. And that's just one example. She's, as I mentioned, she's becoming more independent and likes to do a lot of things herself. And it's like such a huge weight has been lifted just to let her take those things off my plate. Accepting that maybe it's going to look different if she does it than if I was to do it. I know that, and I accept it because there is something to be said about having these things removed from your plate. Not to mention when I'm battling with a tween girl, which for those of you who can relate to that, also know that that is also no easy thing. And I'm not feeling better, because I've got the perfect system in place to do her perfect hair and perfect makeup. I'm feeling better because I'm not feeling as concerned. I'm not feeling concerned about it being perfect. And not only does that take some pressure off, but it quite literally takes some things that used to be my things to do, making those competitions, recitals, picture days, and everything else feel just a little bit less stressful. So obviously that's just an example. We all have our own examples that I'm sure that we can think of. But the point is that I'm giving myself permission to do less, to accept less than perfect, and allow somebody else to step in and take over and do some of the things. And the moms who learn how to do that, the moms who learn how to, again, do less, accept less than perfect, allow help, any of those things, those are the moms who are generally more likely to feel this weight being lifted and to move past, get rid of their burnout. And I get it. It is really hard. If you are someone who spent years being the responsible one, the strong one, the one who always figures it out, those changes can feel really, really hard because they force you to challenge beliefs that you've had for a really long time, quite possibly your entire life. So I'm talking about beliefs like, I should be able to handle this. I don't want to disappoint anyone. It's easier if I just do it myself. If I don't do it, it won't get done right. When it comes to burnout recovery, most moms don't need more willpower. They need more self compassion, more support, and more permission to stop holding themselves to impossible standards. And when I say permission, I mean permission from themselves. The goal, if we think about what it is that we're trying to accomplish, the goal is not to create a life where you carry everything. It is to create a life where you don't have to, where you don't have to be the one carrying everything. So that's the second lesson, right? Like that's the big takeaway that I really want you guys to hear. I really want all the working moms to know. The third lesson that I want every burned out working mom to know is that you can love your family and still need something for yourself. Both things can be true at the same time. And when I say that, what I mean by that is, for so many working moms, once they take on these sometimes all consuming roles, they eventually start to realize they've kind of lost touch with themselves. I can't tell you how many moms I've heard say something along the lines of, I miss my old self, or I miss my life before I was a mom. And for a lot of them, they feel guilty even thinking that because they think it somehow suggests that they regret motherhood or want a different life. But for most moms, that really is not the case. That's not what they're saying when they say those things. Most burned out moms don't actually want a different life. What they want is to feel like themselves again. So that's what I'm talking about here. You can need something for yourself. It does not mean you don't love your family or that you regret your choices. So when moms first start talking about burnout, they typically focus on all the things that are not working. Maybe they talk about being exhausted, overwhelmed, short tempered, frustrated with their spouse, feeling guilty all the time, struggling to keep up, those sorts of things. It can sound like they're unhappy with motherhood, their career, their family, just their life in general. But I can tell you from the many conversations that I've had, that's almost never what's actually happening. Most of the moms that I talk to love their kids. They love their families. Many of them love their jobs, although it's okay if you don't. If that's you, that's okay. We can talk about that too. But the fact is that, you know, it's not that they want a completely different life. That is not the problem. The problem is that somewhere along the way, they lost themselves in the life that they worked so hard to build. And I'm guessing a lot of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So I encourage you to take a minute and think about who you used to be before life got so busy. Maybe you had hobbies that you don't have time for anymore. Um, Maybe you were more energized, more confident. Maybe you remember laughing a lot more. Maybe you had other dreams and interests outside of taking care of everyone else. So if I were to ask you right now what you do for fun, would you know how to answer? Could you answer that question right now? One of the hardest parts of burnout, more than the stress and exhaustion, is the idea that maybe you don't know who you are anymore and you've spent so much time being what everyone else needs that you've lost touch with what you need and what you enjoy. So, with all of that being said, the thing that I really want you to take away from this lesson is that the version of you I just described, the version of you that remember from before life gets busy, she is still there. Part of, she's just, maybe she's hiding a little bit, but she is still there. Part of burnout recovery is reconnecting with yourself and rediscovering who you are outside of your roles and responsibilities and creating space for the things that you need for your own happiness. You can be an incredible mom and still want something for yourself. You can miss that other version of yourself and still be grateful for your life. Again, two things can be true at the same time. Okay, so now on to lesson number 4 that I want every burned out working mom to know. And that is that things can change faster than you think. I want to take a minute to talk about this because I do believe that mom burnout has become so normalized that it's practically expected. And because of that, I think a lot of moms have really kind of given up a hope that things can be different. Because they've been struggling for so long, they kind of stop questioning it. They start to believe things like, this is just what motherhood is, or this is just what happens when you have a career and kids, or this is just how it's going to be until my kids are older. And while there is some truth to those things, motherhood is obviously very demanding, and as our kids get older, the challenges do change. But I also think a lot of moms are settling for much more suffering than they really need to be. I know things can get better for so many of you because I have seen it and I've experienced it. I have seen moms improve their relationships. I've seen moms go from feeling resentful all the time to feeling supported. I've seen moms learn how to set boundaries after years of people pleasing. I've seen moms stop feeling guilty every time they did something for themselves. I've seen all these things with my friends, with the moms that I've worked with, the moms that I've coached, the conversations that I've had. Like, I have seen these things. So I know 100% it can be done. And I also think back on my own life, because again, as I mentioned, I've experienced these things too. I think back to, where I was 10 years ago as a new mom, working in a high stress environment, a high burnout industry. And then I look at my life today. And that's not to say that I don't experience stress. Yes, of course I still get stressed. Of course I do. Stress is normal. But remember, regular stress is temporary. It's manageable. It comes in waves. It is different than burnout. And that does not have to be your normal. So for the moms who do start to experience this change, you might be wondering, okay, it all sounds great, but how do I actually do that? So for the moms who have experienced this change, changing their lives to one that is not one of burnout, it starts with making the decision to stop accepting burnout as a normal commitment it starts with making a decision to stop accepting burnout as normal and making a commitment to finally start prioritizing themselves the way they've been prioritizing everybody else. And it also, starts by having a willingness to ask for help. So I want you to understand that recovery from burnout is not one huge life-changing decision or breakthrough moment. And I think that's also an important thing to mention because sometimes when moms think about burnout recovery, they imagine this huge mountain that seems impossible to climb. But really, it's about several small decisions and gradual shifts that happen one step at a time. So you can feel like yourself again. And, if you don't know where to start, that's okay. Most of the moms that I work with felt exactly the same way when they started. But know that you don't have to keep trying to figure this out by yourself. Information is helpful. Absolutely. Again, it's one of the reasons that I created this podcast. So, I encourage you to keep learning, however you like to do that. Keep learning, keep, exploring the resources, listening to podcasts, reading the books. But one thing I also want to gently say is that as wonderful as information is, it is only as helpful as what you do with it. So change happens when you start applying what you've learned and doing it with support. And that could be support from your mom friends, your community, maybe you have a therapist. And I also want to remind you that I am here too. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. And that's exactly why I do what I do, why I offer the coaching, the other resources like the guides and the mini courses and the things that I've been creating. Um, because knowing what to do and then actually doing them are two very different things. And sometimes having that support can help you get there faster than trying to figure everything out on your own. Sometimes having someone walk alongside you, help you identify what's keeping you stuck, and supporting you while you make those changes can make all the difference. So, whether we work together or not, I just want you to know that I am always here rooting you on, from the sidelines, from behind the scenes. I'm always thinking about you, moms. I'm always rooting you on um, because I get it. Being a working mom myself, having been through burnout myself, having, seen and heard the stories of the people that I know and that I've worked with, it's just know that I'm rooting for you. And with regards to the 1 year of this podcast, the 1 year anniversary of this podcast, whether you've been listening since the very first episode or if you just found out last week, I just want to say that I'm very grateful that you're here, being part of this community, showing up for yourself and for the other moms who are also looking for support. It means so much more than you know. And as a thank you to all of you wonderful moms and to celebrate this anniversary, I have a few things that I would like to give away. So, got three things here. Um, so we're podcasting here, overcaffeinated, And so as a nod to that, the first thing that I am going to give away, it's just a little fun thing that I created, I designed, it's an uh, overcaffeinated and out of F's podcast coffee mug. Um, so maybe you can think of it as one more day before the dishes need to be washed again. I don't know. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I am giving away is a $25 Visa gift card. So that is like cash in hand. So that's always exciting. So I will be, giving away one of those. And then the third and most valuable thing that I am giving away are 3 free coaching sessions. I'm offering a free 45-minute coaching session to the first 3 of you who reach out, just to help you get a boost on your burnout recovery journey. Because I do know that sometimes, taking that first step and just kind of getting started, um, can be can be the hardest part. Sometimes with that nudge, it can really be helpful in just sort of getting moving. So I'm going to help with that too by offering those sessions to the first 3 people who reach out. So the only thing that I'm asking for from you to be eligible for any of these gifts, so whether it's the mug, the Visa gift card, or the coaching sessions, is to go to Apple Podcasts, go to Spotify, wherever it is that you like to listen to your podcast, and please rate the show so that I know that you've listened to at least one episode. The other reason that I'm asking you to do this is because ratings help boost the show on these platforms and so that more moms can easily find it. And that's really the goal, is to help support as many burned out, career-minded moms as I can. So that's all you have to do. Just rate the show, take a screenshot of it so that I know that you've done it. And then you can send me the picture of the screenshot through Facebook Messenger. I will include a link in the show notes so that you can easily find where to do that, where to send it. So throughout the week, anybody who sends me screenshots will have their name entered into a drawing for the mug and the gift card. I'll plan to draw the winners 2 weeks from today. I was going to do it 1 week, but since that would be a holiday weekend and people might be away or off the regular schedules, I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to listen to the episode and had the opportunity to send me their screenshots. So be sure to send them to me by midnight, so 12 o'clock a.m. Eastern time on July 13th. So that's actually a Monday, the day new episodes typically come out on Tuesday. So it's going to be, Monday the day before that. And that way I can do the drawings and announce the winners the next morning on that podcast that gets released on the 14th. The coaching sessions, though, those are first come, first serve starting right now. So take your screenshot, send me a message if you would like one of the free coaching sessions. And if you are one of the first 3 moms to do that, I will send you my booking calendar to schedule that. So those are the 3 things. Again, just as a big, big, big thank you. I'm just so excited to be here 1 year later. So that is it for today. And again, I really do appreciate all you. I'm so honored to have you listening to this podcast and allowing me to support you. Because as always, we are all in this together.